Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Politics, pandemics, and division. Where are we now in history? And how far away is the Messiah? We're going to be speaking with a rabbi today who's going to be talking about this subject because he writes many, many books about the end of days, the Messianic process and the Messianic era. But we're in a world today where it's been pretty much turned upside down with the coronavirus pandemic, closing down countries, economies, people's jobs, keeping people caged in their homes. And then we had the change in governments from conservative leaders to left-wing leaders or leaderships very recently, such as in the United States and Israel. We've also seen collapses in the Jewish world with buildings and structures falling, killing scores of Jewish people, not only in Israel's Mount Meron area, but also in Givat Ze'ev, which is near Jerusalem, where a bleacher stand collapsed, wounding over 150 people and killing at least 2. And then there was the Italian cable car collapse, killing almost an entire family of Israelis. And then again in Surfside, Florida. And a lot of people are talking about that. What does it mean, all of these collapses? And then let's talk about the big division between people with political streams of the left and the right, the people hating the Trumpsters saying that the elections were stolen on the left, and the left doing all sorts of things that are against the ethics of Judeo-Christian values, etc. And then there's the debate of the vaccinated and unvaccinated people. It's not really even a debate. It's a division, a real physical division. So where does that take us all? This anger on both sides, dividing people, because we say what the world needs now is love, sweet love, but we need the Messiah to do it, to teach us to love each other, that we're all one, that God is one, and we're all one. We'll be right back, everybody. Don't go anywhere.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And we're talking today about the things that are dividing us. We've got politics, of course. You saw what happened with the American elections, where they went from a conservative president to a president that's being run, many believe, by the left wing. Pandemics, of course, which is dividing people, and other things of division, plus collapses. And I'll go more into that when we get later into the show. Our guest is Rabbi Pinchas Winston, because he is an expert on the Messianic era, and he's written lots of books about it. And we want to know, with all of that, what's going on today, where are we now in history, and how far away is the Messiah? Rabbi Pinchas Winston runs the website 36.org. It was established in 2004 to act as a means to share the depth and beauty of Judaism to the world. And it was inspired by current events, which were prophesized in end-of-day scenarios. He's written over 50 books on various topics of Jewish interest, the Messiah, and end-of-days topics. And these books are all available on his website at 36.org on his online bookstore. And 36.org, by the way, is spelled out THIRTYSIX. That's not the numerals, but spelled out. So I want to welcome to the show Rabbi Pinchas Winston.
Thank you very much. Just this is a side point. The books are also available in Amazon in softcover and hardcover, some of the books as well. That's one of the main places that I sell the books, so it might be easier to find them there.
Okay. And a lot of his books are very short and very easy to read, so they're very nice as well. Go ahead, Rabbi.
Like you're 4 or 5 pages long, more or less.
No, not that short. Not that short. They're books.
With big letters. Big letters.
No. They're books. All right. So let's go first into, I think, probably the biggest issue, the biggest immediate issue is the coronavirus pandemic. They're now saying that there's a Delta variant, the Indian variant, and now we have to go back to masks. Now other countries are also bringing in the green passports. This is dividing people. Just last week, the new Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, went on. I don't know if you saw his speech, but it was pretty damning to people who have chosen not to be vaccinated at this time. They want to wait and see. They want to get more data. As it is, it's an experimental vaccine. And people, as they say, it's been around since January. Everybody who wanted to get the vaccine will get the vaccine. And those who haven't yet don't want it, or at least at this time. And so now he's saying that they can't go to synagogue anymore. They can't go to any places of over 100 people, whether it's inside or outside. That means any weddings that are bigger than that, or stores, I would imagine. They can't go to movie theaters. He is basically saying that the unvaccinated people are a problem. This is a big division in the people. There's also division for the Bibi supporters to the Lapid supporters, and then from the Trump supporters to the Biden supporters. And we see what's happening with China today. And the whole world seems to be, going to, spreading out to all different sides. So where would you like to start?
Well, first, I just want to qualify when you say Messianic expert. It kind of sounds like that I know everything there's to know about the topic. That's certainly not the case, and people often want to know if that means also including knowing the date that he's supposed to arrive, which I definitely don't know. It's just that I spent a lot of time in this topic and looked at all the sources and put together kind of a larger picture. So, just to be clear from the start. Having said that, everything that we're talking about, everything we're looking at has to be viewed in terms of the big picture, because there's only two modes of history, at least from a Torah perspective, from a Jewish perspective, a traditional Jewish perspective. One of the best statements I think that I've ever read or heard, I think it's in Diaspora Museum on the wall as well, but those who forget are doomed to repeat. Now, what that basically means is it's pretty simple, that history repeats itself. That the whole premise of that statement is that history repeats itself, and not just once in a while, but all the time. And that things are kind of like a pendulum swing, that one day is going up here and then another time it's going back there, but it's basically going back and forth in the same direction it has the entire time. People would like to believe, or at least they live their lives as if everything is changing, everything is brand new. And therefore, there's nothing to learn from the past, because it's all uncharted ground, and we're the first ones there, like climbing to the Mount of Everest for the first time. But that's not the way history works. Clearly, not just from a religious perspective, but from a historical perspective. I mean, anybody who's learned history over time can see how the same things happen over and over again. And one of the main reasons why that's the case is because, again, even if you don't believe in God and you don't believe in Torah, you have to believe in the existence of man. And man never really changes. He has the same instincts he always has. He has the same drives, the same greed that's driven man for thousands of years, the same desires, the same sins being committed. The only thing that changes perhaps, is the technology that allows us to carry out the plans that we have. For example, the Holocaust was really the Crusades and the Cossack attacks on the Jewish people, but exponentially greater because they had the technology to do it much quicker, much more efficiently. You can even use a word for things like that. And that's what changes. But the actual way that we function and work and the things that happen tend to be exactly the same. So therefore, by definition, we're going to repeat things in history. And as the Talmud likes to point out, the wise person is the person who can see what's being born. In other words, they look at what's going on in the present. They don't obsess only in the present, but they project into the future. And they ask the question, where is this going down the road? What can this lead to? Why make the mistake? Someone this morning received a link for a video. It's by the Armstrong Economics website. I don't exactly know who they are, but that's where the video is actually cited. And it's titled, so you think you were free, or something to that effect. And it is a 4.5-minute video that is so startling and so ground shaking that a whole day later I'm still being affected by it. What was it about? It's a German who basically is narrating how the German people were literally lulled into the Holocaust. How they got from point A to point B. They weren't Nazis from day one. The Nazis themselves would have been Nazis from day one, but the German people certainly weren't, and many weren't at the end either. So how was it that so many intelligent people could do such a terribly destructive thing? And he actually outlines it in this video. And as I'm listening to this thing, I'm thinking to myself, well, that's what's going on today. The exact same thing is going on today. And it's not necessarily for a Holocaust, God forbid, or something to that effect. But let's not forget that the Cossacks wore different uniforms than the Romans did, and the Nazis wore different uniforms than the Cossacks did. But at the root of it was the same thing. Anti-Semitism, destruction, cruelty, all these different things that has been a thread through all of history. That's just one particular point off the bat to make because a lot of people think, well, it's biblical wisdom, it's Torah, what can it talk about today? We're so far advanced. I actually saw one of my books I'm just finishing up right now, or just finished up right now. I was looking for a quote at the beginning of the book, and it's amazing what you can find online. Quotes for almost anything and jokes and all that, but one of them was about the idiocy of governments, written by a famous writer whose name escapes me right now, but he had said that he often wondered whether the government was just something pulling a fast one over us, or actually that's stupid. And it's like, if you look at the controversy surrounding coronavirus, its origin, what it is, how it came to be. It's, in the States, it's developing tremendous momentum and revelation, things that we suspected perhaps at the beginning, but then it got washed over by the governments. Because one of the most difficult things to do is to believe that people in power would ever do, such malicious things to their own people.
Right.
Or, so ignorantly and take such a risk. So we literally throw caution to the wind and give them the benefit of, or the benefit of the doubt in this case, and as if that's the truth. And then, of course, we find that later on it can be a tragic, tragic mistake. And
you mean to believe your government, to trust in your government?
Yeah, that everybody just go ahead, mass vaccination. I got that vaccination, that vaccine. It's not even a vaccine, as they point out. It's technically speaking doesn't work the same way a vaccine works. It's a whole different thing. It's experimental, etc. So I'm not talking to somebody who didn't get the vaccine. I'm talking to somebody who got it because that's what I was told to do by the people I trust. But from a historical perspective, you've got all this controversy, and it's just part of the chaos that exists. And we have to remember that the people in government are just people, and many of them, the best politicians do not go into politics, period.
There was a meme that was going around saying that doctors should dress like race car drivers and have like the patches of who sponsors them on their lab coats. So you can see Pfizer, all the Moderna, etc.
The money trail is unbelievable, but that's not the point. That could be a whole couple hours, and there's many, many videos and things about that are out there already. So we don't need to go down that path. Just pointing it out as part of a larger picture. The main point that I'm concerned with is not that, because everything comes from God, even if it's a conspiracy, so to speak. The question is, what does it mean to us? What are we supposed to do about it, and where are we supposed to go with it? These are the questions that we have to ask from a big picture, end of days type perspective, which I guess we'll have to talk about
in the next segment. Right. Okay. So we'll be back, everybody. And if you want to call in, you can call in. Our numbers are on the top of our homepage at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And we're going to be talking about, with all of this division that we're seeing, and a movie that he made many years ago, talking about in the time of the Messiah, there's predicted to be floods, etc. So that's very interesting as well. We're seeing floods happening in the news in China and Europe, etc. So when will the Messiah come? We'll be right back.
Hi, everyone. This is Andrea Siminto from Jerusalem, inviting you to drop everything and join me on my show, Pull Up a Chair. We'll visit this week's quirky stories, meet fabulous guests, and discover my Israel. Together, we'll laugh, shout, and explain the topics that make us say, hey, we've got to talk about that. So get comfortable and pull up a chair with me, Andrea Siminto, every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we're back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we're talking about politics, pandemics, and division. Where are we now in history, and how far away is the Messiah? We have joining us now Rabbi Pinchas Winston. He runs the website called 36.org. That's spelled out in letters, 36.org. And he's written dozens and dozens of books on the Messiah, the end of days, Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, etc. And he is joining us today to talk about how close we are to the Messianic times. Rabbi, I posted right before the show that I posted that question, how close are we to the Messiah? And some of the answers were hundreds and hundreds of years away. So where are we in history?
And how they know that? Where's that coming from? Is that more of a guess? Is that more of some knowledge type of a thing?
Good question.
I don't have time to go into right now. My books do, for anybody who wants to. I can come back another time and go through the calculation. But we do. I can't tell you the date of Mashiach's arrival because that seems to be hidden. But I can tell you, based upon some very, very prominent sources, that we can begin to tell when things are wrapping up by the signs, by things that happen in history. We know that that's the way God communicates to the Jewish people and to the world in general at the end of days. Once upon a time, we had prophets. Right, those are the people who spoke to God, and God talked directly to them, and they told us what God was thinking. It was very convenient. It was much easier than watching the 6 o'clock news, to know what God was on his mind, so we could hopefully adjust to it, make the changes necessary, and to learn what had to be learned. Today, we don't have prophets like that. We have different types of prophets, stock market, Wall Street, things like that. But they don't help us too much necessarily. They are part of those signs at the end of the days, and that's what we're paying attention. That's what a person has to look at. And sometimes if you only have one sign, it's just like an illness, for example. You get a runny nose. There's no proof from a runny nose that you have a cold. Sometimes it could be allergy. Sometimes the change of temperature in the room. You don't know for sure that you're getting sick. But if you have your eyes start to get all bloodshot and tired and droopy and you start to get a headache. So enough of these signs come together, at some point you say, that's it. I've got to be coming down with something, and I better start taking care of myself. And it works the exact same with history. Some things happen early. In fact, the Talmud speaks about Rebbe Tzadok. Rebbe Tzadok was a rabbi at the time of the Romans, the Second Temple period of time. And it says that he fasted for 40 years before the temple was destroyed to try to avert the destruction of the temple. Now, he was the only one that they talk about. Now, how did he know? Now, it could be he had a tradition, but more than likely, he saw signs. And one of those signs at that time was that the temple doors would open by themselves. Now, it was remarkable, and not everybody saw that. And he thought, this is an invitation to the Romans to come and destroy the temple. And he responded to it by fasting for 40 years. At nighttime he would eat, the daytime he would fast, and he became incredibly skinny. as a result of this. You could actually see the food go down his throat, the Talmud says. And the rest of the people, even when the Romans finally came, they weren't prepared for what was happening. And the reason is very simple, is that he saw signs, he paid attention to these signs, he understood they were coming from God, even though there was no prophecy at that time, and he responded to it. He was not able to avert the destruction of the temple, but he was able to survive what happened after that, where many other people either died in the siege and from plague and from famine, etc., etc., etc. So that's the thing that always concerns us. Now, if there were no signs to talk about, if we had no tradition to tell us what those signs were, then we'd be making them up. And we'd never be able to know what they mean because they came from us. But it happens to be that we do have traditions, and I began to speak about in the first segment, that history repeats itself. And one of the reasons why that history does repeat itself is that we can learn from the past. There's even a commandment in the Torah that tells us we should make a point of learning from the past, because that's the only way to avert the disasters of the future. You know, there are people who survived the Holocaust, who died in the last 10, 15, 20 years, who saw the direction of history and began to cry out, this is what happened in our time back in the 1930s. And people, what are you talking about? This is America, this is Canada, this is England. It can't be happening at this time in history. No way. But they saw the signs, they recognized them, and they knew the past. Everybody else ignores the past. So you have to know certain ground rules to do with redemption. Now, if you don't believe in God and you don't believe in the Torah, right, then basically, I guess, if you're listening, you just want to hear what I have to say. But it's not going to make much of a difference because it doesn't have any validity as far as you're concerned. But if you do believe in God and you do believe in the Torah and tradition, then what I have to say right now is extremely important in terms of preparing for what's coming up.
Okay.
Because it's not simply that history comes to an end and that's it. Like, you know, a play where it's 3 acts long, it's meant to last 60 minutes altogether, and when the final curtain goes down, that's it. People get up and go home and talk about the play they saw, they liked it, didn't like it. That's not history. History basically it's like trial by fire in a sense. We weren't just here to walk the face of the earth and have a good time. We may have done that, and that's kind of a nice side benefit of being in this world. But we're here to accomplish something. We're here to do something. We're here to make something of ourselves that's important as far as God is concerned. And all of history and all of life is just an opportunity to be able to accomplish that. And like any game show, the World Series, whatever you're watching, it comes down to the final game and the final minutes, and all the pressure's on, and you're taking all kinds of risks. But in the end, we're trying to determine who is the winner here. Who's the one who's going to walk away and say that we were able to see. Now, there's more than one type of winner. If the other team is better and you can't beat them, fine. But at least you did the best you could. And that's also called winning too, because you did the best you could. So God principally wants to see who makes the most of life, who is concerned about the opportunity to accomplish meaningful things in this world, and where they stand. And this is very important, this is crucial, where they stand on the key issues, right? Where they like, what is the most important thing to you? How do you feel about it? You go to the right, you go to the left. And you notice, like you've been mentioning the entire time, all these events are divisive. And decisive, but divisive, meaning what? That they are happening to us to force people to get off the fence and make a decision about where they stand, on what they stand, and which direction they're going. Yeah, we got a caller?
Yeah, hi. We have a caller, Antonio from the settlement of New York. Hi there, Antonio. What's your comment?
No, Washington.
Washington, sorry for the settlement of Washington.
No
Go ahead.
No, my statement is, you're right. History do repeat itself because the lines, God has given us a line to cross, to go to be with Him or to be against Him. Look at how Pharaoh tricked the Israelites into slavery, so forth. So the same thing is happening again, and people need to read the Torah and learn from that, from those experiences, and to be aware of what's going on.
Okay, so did you have a question for Rabbi Winston?
Yeah, my question is, I mean, we don't know where the Mashiach will be coming and when he arrives, but the signs are there. And I have debate with some people years and back and forth, and they debated with me and said, well, he's going to be here within 2 or 3 years. And I'm like, okay, if he's going to be here in 2 or 3 years, Hashem is going to change the date, because no man has the knowledge to know that.
Okay, so Rabbi, what's your answer to Antonio?
Can I hang up?
Yeah, I think you're right. That there's no question that the actual date he shows up. I mean, first of all, as far as I'm concerned, he's already here. Okay, we're so close to the end. He's not like he's going to be 3 years old when he delivers the world, from all the chaos and all that. He's going to be a mature individual. Exactly how old, I don't know.
So the question is, Rabbi, does the Messiah know that he's the Messiah right now, or will God tell him later?
Well, let me ask him. I'll get right back to you. But
no, because some people say that God hasn't revealed to the Messiah yet that he's the Messiah. So I was just wondering.
They can't know, just like we can't know.
Okay.
It's all guesswork. But like I said before, you have to go back to the sources. You have to go back to the past. You have to see, are there any answers? And I found almost every question that I've ever had to do with these issues, there's an answer somewhere in the past. So, for example, when I had that question, I never thought about this before until I had this question that you had right now. And the answer is that at least the source says that Moshe, or Moses, right? Well, he was born 80 years before he actually got the tap on the shoulder from God to go get the Jewish people out of Egypt.
Right.
80 years. He was a prince in Pharaoh's house, which is very unusual. The whole incident with the baby in the basket and all that, right? And then he ran to Cush, a place in Africa, and a long story till it got to the point where God finally found him, herding sheep for his father-in-law Yitro in the desert, or Jethro, right? And then God said, "Okay, it's time. It's time to fulfill my promise." And Moshe, I don't want to go, And God says, "You have to go." They argue for a whole 7 days. So finally, God says, "Moses, you got to go," and he goes. But for 79 years, he didn't know he was Mashiach. But that doesn't change anything. The fact that he didn't know it, he was born to be this thing. He was born to be that. What do we care, really, if he knows it or not? If any second he gets the tap on the shoulder and God says, "Well, you're him. You're the one. I'm sending you right now," right? So that's the important thing. But you have to understand and appreciate, and it changed my appreciation to know that Mashiach could have been here for 100 years already on the face of the earth without us knowing it, just waiting for that call.
Okay, so we have to go to a break, but when we get back, I want to ask you about, if you could just kind of like run off some signs that our sages, talk about, the prophets, etc., that we are in the Messianic era, and just to give people some guidance, also what we need to do in order to change. We're going to be right back, everybody. Don't go anywhere.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Hello, I am Walter Bingham. If you want to hear the news behind the news and the true perspective on world affairs, then the Walter Bingham File is the program for you. We bring you interviews with the movers and shakers, political commentaries, and on-the-spot reports of events as they happen. All here every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Israel time, 9 a.m. Eastern time. And it's all archived on our website. Make it a date.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar, Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we're talking about the signs that we're seeing today Does this mean that we are in the historical period of the arrival of the Messiah? How soon will the Mashiach or the Messiah be here? People have been praying for him for centuries and centuries and centuries. And we're seeing things happening today in the news that our prophets talked about, that our sages wrote about. And we're asking our guest, Rabbi Pinchas Winston of 36.org, what he sees as signs that it's possible that we are indeed in the Messianic era and that the Messiah will come soon. So I want to welcome back to the show, Rabbi Pinchas Winston.
Thank you. I have to talk very fast here, okay? Anybody wants to see more details, kid, there's a book I just finished publishing called Drowning in Pshat, which is available on Amazon, but I'm not going to go there right now. The main point right now, just some signs, okay? The Intifada began in 1987. It seemed to come out of nowhere. That's always a sign of something special because there's no logic behind it. It just poof, like that. We have an expression or actually a verse that says, this is from God, that which is wondrous in our eyes. If it catches your attention, it means it's overt divine providence. So the Intifada came exactly 40 years after the state was formed. 40 is always a number in Kabbalah that expresses a concept of gestation, of completion. There's an analysis behind that. I'm just pointing out that this is something that just didn't come out of the blue. It means something, and it changed the direction of history exactly at a very propitious time because, according to tradition, the final stage of Kibbutz Galius, the ingathering of the exiles, and that itself is an amazing thing. The Torah, thousands of years ago, even if a person doesn't believe the Torah came from God, we do know the Torah itself goes back at least 1,000 to 2,000 years, 2,000 years for sure. And so whoever wrote it, of course, say God wrote it, we believe it 100%. But for those who don't want to believe that, still have to contend with the fact that the Torah itself predicted the Jewish people would come back to their land after being exiled and retake that land, and it would happen towards the end of days. And as of the 1800s, when waves of aliyah to the land have been building up to the point that we're now basically the majority of the Jewish population in the world, if you go according to Torah standards, to determine who's actually Jewish and who's not Jewish. That's a phenomenal sign unto itself. Aside from the fact that in 1948, the UN, which itself is a very important part of the picture in terms of understanding how it's a sign, because according to the Vilna Gaon, a great rabbi living towards the middle of the 1700s, he mentions that the Jewish people do not merit a redemption, directly, miraculously, like we like to have it. Then it has to come with the permission of the nations of the world, like it did in the time of Cyrus, because Cyrus gave us permission to go back to the land of Israel.
Of Persia,
now that's
right.
an incredible thing, because the UN only existed, it seems, that for that vote. We were able to accomplish that at the time that the Jewish people, after the Holocaust, these are all pieces to a puzzle.
Okay.
You have on top of that other things. The fact that the desert has bloomed, right? They were able to use the technology to be able to cause the land to become green once again, and without all the natural resources that other countries have to develop themselves while fighting wars at the same time is absolutely unbelievable and miraculous. The inexplicable collapse of the USSR at the end of the 1980s, allowing Jews to get out of Russia, the last place that masses of Jews were being held against their will, changing the demographics of the country once again at a time that was predicted as part of the ingathering of the exiles, right? And that is against the background, right, of other predictions to do with the Messianic era. For example, how life in the diaspora will start becoming difficult once again for Jews. And you see that turning point exactly around the same time. 1990, the Persian Gulf War. Most people see that war, which didn't make sense. Why would Saddam Hussein go into a country that's oil-rich and gold-rich, knowing full well that the rest of the world is not going to stand for it? It was a suicide mission in the end, and exactly what happened. It cost him his life, cost him his country, right? But that Gulf War changed the dynamics of American politics in terms of the Jewish people. AIPAC, which is the Jewish lobby, which almost any time they got involved on behalf of the Jewish people, Israel usually got their way, one way or another. But this war was a turning point. Why? Because this war forced the hand of the Americans and the Arabs to make an alliance. Now, the moment that the alliance gets stronger between the Americans and the Arabs, it's going to get weaker between the Americans and the Jews. It's exactly what happened, exactly that time, making it less comfortable for Jews to live in the diaspora. And it's been going the exact same direction the entire time. The World Trade Center, another big knock on history, coming after Y2K, which from a Kabbalistic perspective was extremely significant, but not for the reasons that people thought or understood. And that's usually the way it is. People tend to be small picture oriented. They're used to looking at things in terms of their own personal lives. We're trained to look at things in terms of all of history, the larger picture, to put the pieces into perspective. So it's extremely important to understand that when these things happen, these massive attacks on American soil, how was it possible? Conspiracy? No conspiracy. It doesn't make a difference, because even if people were responsible for it, or the coronavirus or the vaccine, even if there are people doing nefarious things, the bottom line is that no one can do anything that God doesn't want, and no one can't do something that God does want. If anything happens in history, by definition, it is the hand of God. If it's the hand of God and getting so directly involved so many ways, and you have natural disasters, you have flooding taking place at the same time, you have temperature swings that are unusual. Again, each one in and of themselves may not be so unique. Through the course of history, you'll probably find an example for everything. But when they start to happen together at one time, well, it's because of one reason. Because we have to wake up. The prophet Ezekiel says at the end of days that God will change our hearts from hearts of stones to hearts of flesh. That's one huge, massive open heart surgery. How's he going to do it? Which doctors will he involve? No doctors. Events. Events will happen that soften our heart, that turn them from stone to flesh, meaning that we can't handle it. People die. They go to Meron on Lag BaOmer, a very holy day, and the building collapses and people die, or in a synagogue, or someone gets stabbed. All these things, again, happening against the backdrop of another disaster, It says in the Torah itself, God says, you'll only recover from one, and the next one will come. It doesn't have to be that way, by the way. That's the choice that we make by ignoring the previous signs. If people would simply wake up and say, wow, this has got to be the hand of God, and this has got to be telling us something. And since we're so close to the end of history, how didn't we know that? Because the rabbi said so, right? All this in the context of that must mean that history is coming to an end. Well, that sounds too fantastic to believe. Well, you're right. It is too fantastic to believe because it's outside of our experience. But that doesn't mean it's not true. Because, we didn't believe the Holocaust could happen either. And we didn't believe that the Jewish people could go back and return to the state of Israel after 1,000 years of wandering. And we didn't believe in this, and we didn't believe in that, but they happened anyhow. The fact that humans can't believe in something does not mean it's impossible. It just means it's outside their experience. We're here to expand our minds. And you do that by looking at the sources, by looking at the signs, by paying attention to them, by looking for the answers. Today, we have such a network of knowledge and information that a person can become a genius overnight. You have to find the answers, because if you ignore them, if anything repeats itself in history, it's when people ignore the signs, they always come back to haunt them. And that's what God's doing right now.
So let me ask you, with some more current events that we're seeing flooding around the world in China, massive flooding in Europe, where people are dying from these, or have died from these floods. We're seeing the division with people. You talk about God making our hearts from stone into hearts of flesh, but you see people's hearts hardened right now with the hatred against Israel, the hatred against Trump voters and Biden supporters, etc.
Exactly. That was the second point I made. That was earlier in the show, meaning what? That we see, for example, by the time of Ezra, when he came back from Babylonian at the end of the Purim story, right? They had to decide who belonged, who doesn't belong. God is the captain. He has a team. He wants me, Lashem Alai. Who is for God? Come to me. That's the call. That's the call that always goes out right before the end of history, right before a redemption. God, he just question: who is for me? Come to me. You can either go the other direction or you can go to God. And all of this is to force a person in one direction or another.
So this is a sign, you're saying, all this division. It's a sign that we are close because people have to choose sides, whether they're for God or for the, the new age, the woke, etc.
Listen, the party is over. It always ends at some point in time, and it's usually followed by some major catastrophic event. We've run out of time. The only one left is the end of days. That's all that's. All the other ones have come and gone. This, as a Gemara, the Talmud says it. This is it. So that's what has to happen, and we're being tested. And the test is, where do you stand with respect to truth? ultimate truth.
Mm-hmm. So in the last few seconds that we have on the show, when would you, try to tell people, are we very, very close to the Messiah coming, or where are we?
Extreme. Put this way, we're so close that it's just too hard to believe it could be that close, because people expect major changes by the time it happens. But if the coronavirus taught us anything at all, and that's part of why it came, was to show us how quickly God can change history, how quickly like the World Trade Center. One moment you're having coffee at the base of the building, the next you're running for your life. When God decides, that's it. It happens in the wink of an eye.
And all the signs that we're seeing, you're saying, are showing us that He's imminent. It's imminent within the next year or two or something.
This is the preparatory time. If a person misses on this one, they're not going to have time at the end to do anything significant.
All right. Well, if people want to get Rabbi Pinchas Winston's books, they can go to his website at 36.org, to his store there. They can also be found on Amazon. And Rabbi, 10 seconds, 5 seconds. You want to say the last word? But really, 5 seconds. Go again.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I'm going to thank you all for listening. And if you have any comments or questions, you can feel free to write me, Tamar at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and I will pass them on to the good rabbi. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
If you're hearing this message, everyone else can too. Advertise with Israel News Talk Radio and get your message out to people. We'll build a personalized package for you. Contact advertising at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Jake in Anchorage, Alaska, and I love listening to all the super interesting interviews and up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel.
Hello, this is Anna King, originally from London, now living in Israel. And what can I say? Israel News Talk Radio is my cup of tea.
My name is Bhaskar. I'm from India, and I love listening because you get to know the truth and wonderful voices from this lovely country.
Mom! Okay, wait a minute. Hi, this is Chava Dax, and I'm calling from the rolling hills of Ma'ale Adumim, just north of Jerusalem. I always listen to Israel News Talk Radio to get all the latest news and commentary and to keep me up to date every day.
This is Sarah Dax from Ma'ale Adumim, and I'm 12. I wish Israel News Talk Radio was boring so my mom wouldn't listen to it all the time. Mom!
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.